Good morning, Baltimore. It is Thursday, July 16th. Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Early Birds podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich, alongside sports columnist Josh Tolentino, who returns to us after 2 weeks of exciting life changes. Josh, pop in the question. Your longtime girlfriend, congratulations. You are an engaged man. How do you feel?
Man, Matt, I am feeling great. My fiance now, that's the new title that, I have to associate now with my former girlfriend, Bia. We are moving into a new apartment here in Maryland, so a lot of transition coming with that. I popped the question on the west side of Hawaii, just north of where Rico Garcia actually is from. I actually asked him for some dinner recommendations for that special night. But yeah, man, got down on one knee and certainly excited for this next chapter and everything that comes with it. She is a pediatric dentist, so she just finished her residency out in Hawaii and now is starting a new job out here in Maryland at the beginning of August. So very exciting time for both of us as we look ahead to our next chapter, joining you and Jacob soon. Not too soon, but eventually in the marriage ranks. But no, I appreciate that.
Yes.
That welcome, and happy to be back on the saddle here with Early Birds.
And not only is your now fiance joining you in Maryland, but you also picked up your dog in Chicago. Just as big of news, I feel like, for me. Not to say I couldn't go a long time without my wife and be feeling some type of way, but going as long as you have without your dog with you, I'm sure that was great to get him back. And how's he getting adjusted to kind of the new surroundings?
Yeah, before we got on, you asked if he was going to make a special appearance. That'd be kind of tough. He is about 80 pounds. He's a half German Shepherd, half Husky, so big guy named Cash. And just some quick background on his information. How he was named, because that question always pops up. Whenever I'm walking him out, especially like in city atmospheres. But people are like, "Oh, why Cash?" 2 reasons. So still play basketball, but before when I got him, man, 12 years ago. He's 12 years and 2 months now. At the time, I was playing basketball like very, very frequently, like every single night. And one of my favorite celebrations was, after making a 3, just, I'd yell out Cash. So that is part one. And also there's got to be a sports element to it. So Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, that his original name. So a nod to the great Muhammad Ali, the Thrilla in Manila, all the fun that comes with the great Muhammad Ali. So that is what makes up Cash and his name. And yeah, definitely very excited to have him here in this chapter. When I joined the Sun last July, up to that point, he had been living with my parents for a few months, and they're also taking care of my brother's dog. He's actually back in medical school, and so they had that brotherly bond. Him and my brother's dog, who's a Pomsky. So tiny dog, big dog. Man, brothers that love each other. So it was tough to take him away from that environment, but certainly excited to have him back. And just as he also gets accustomed to life out here, it's exciting for us. My fiance and I were looking for wedding venues. As it pertains to the dog, we're looking for dog parks and everything of that nature. So if you got any recommendations, we'll definitely join you in Madison.
Yeah, we've taken the dogs to Patterson Park a few times. I have 2 corgis, so I probably should have brought them on the show at some point, at least holding them up, because I can. They're 30 pounds, but it's a dense 30 pounds. They are heavier than they look, but no, they're. I'm glad you were able to reunite with your long lost pet and now have the whole family over here in Maryland. This is Josh, almost a year since you started at the Baltimore Sun, now fully settling in to the region, getting the new place, got everybody over here. Super exciting times for you, and super excited have you back on the show. Been missing having you on here talking O's, and it has been quite the ride since you last came on the show. Orioles up and down for sure, hit a low point, 9 games under 500, but then right to close out the end of the first half, they win 4 in a row, their first 4-game winning streak of the season to go into the All-Star break rolling. Sam and I broke all of that down and talked about the end of the first half on the last episode. Also had an MLB draft preview or MLB draft recap, some takeaways from that, which we've gotten some great feedback from that episode. A lot of people enjoyed it, so glad to hear that. So certainly go check that out if you haven't already. But we're going to talk about the All-Star game because I was out in Philly for, with us recording here on Wednesday afternoon, the last 48 plus hours over there, and following Adley Rutschman around. And it's kind of funny. I was telling a couple people this yesterday, but when the team you cover only has one All-Star, you basically become that guy's stalker for the 48 hours, because everywhere Adley Rutschman turned, I was there, either taking notes, asking questions, or recording video pretty much the whole time. So I'm sure he is sick of me and sick of Andy Koska, the other beat reporter for the Banner, who was out there as well. Two of us just kind of following him around the whole time. It was fun, though. An exciting week for Rutschman, third-time All-Star. You could definitely tell it meant a lot to him to be able to get back to that point after the way his 2025 season went, being limited by injury, taking a step back offensively, being able to show that he is still the Adley Rutschman of old, particularly on the defensive side, which really has been a big standout thing for him this year. But Josh, how much of the game were you able to catch? He obviously didn't enter until the 7th inning.
A good chunk. So also just as a side note, so you were the Adley Rutschman beat reporter for the past few days. Yes. Man, I love it. But another important question before I get to yours: did you try a cheesesteak while you were in Philly?
So I had grand plans to get a cheesesteak on my way out, and then I had 3 Uber drivers cancel on me as I was getting ready to go. So Yikes. It ended up I was trying to get to the train station about 45 minutes early so that I could run over, get a cheesesteak, and then take it to go. That obviously did not happen, but I did have one at the ballpark. I wouldn't say it was any kind of elite cheesesteak, but I did at least have one while I was there. I had to make sure I had at least one while I was there, so I checked off that box. But honestly, didn't get to spend a ton of time in downtown Philly. A little bit last night after the All-Star game, but it was some long days, man. Going out there, the red carpet, standing there for 2 hours in the heat, waiting for Adley to come out and get the videos on there, and then running back over to the ballpark to catch him for clubhouse time and all this stuff. So it was a lot of running around, very busy 48 hours. I believe I wrote 9 stories in 2 days. So definitely go over to BaltimoreSun.com. Ton of coverage, wall to wall, on everything that Adley Rutschman did pretty much for 48 hours straight.
Matt's got you completely covered as it pertains to Adley's activity at the All-Star break. A great story on some defensive changes and his approach there with the help of catching coordinator Joe Singley. Again, check that out.
Who was there as well?
Yeah, I saw Joe's story throughout the Instagram story throughout the weekend that he was posting on there. A special moment for him as he's developed a bond with Samuel Basayo and Adley over the course of the season. To answer your question, I did catch the game. I also caught the home run derby, and I know it was such a hot topic going into it with the rule format change with the timer being taken off. I actually was a pretty big fan, especially kind of the ending there. Between Jordan Walker and Kyle Schwarber. If they had, and I know there's so many discussions about what's going to happen next year as it pertains to getting actual play on the field, not even discussing all-star game format, home run derby format, but as it pertains to the home run derby, I was a big fan of that. And then as it pertains to Adley, exciting moments for him, those final 3 innings, catching some of his former teammates. Did you get a chance to chat with him or any of those guys after, Matt?
Yeah, I went down and talked to both Adley and Drew Rasmussen, his former teammate at Oregon State, who Rasmussen had his manager, Tampa Bay Rays, Kevin Cash, reach out to John Schneider, the skipper for the Toronto Blue Jays, who was also managing the AL in this game, to try and see if they could set something up. And they got back to him saying, yeah, we'll aim for the later innings. Can't guarantee it. Obviously, you never know how pitchers and the game's going to kind of go, and if he might have been needed earlier on, whatever. But they lined it up so that he could pitch to Adley. First time in 9 years that Rasmussen threw a pitch to Adley Rutschman back in their Oregon State days. They overlapped kind of briefly. Rasmussen had a bunch of injuries in his college career, 2 Tommy John surgeries, so that really limited him. But Adley, when he was a freshman, caught Rasmussen in his junior season, which was one of the better years for Oregon State as they kind of got their really run of success going for that storied program. Obviously winning the College World Series in 2018. Yes, 2018. Adley's second season, when he really took off, was one of the best players in the country, playing a huge role in that. Rasmussen was recovering from Tommy John that year, but it was clearly an emotional return for both those guys. They shared a moment together on the mound before pitching, and then at the end of the game, we weren't sure we were going to get this, but Brian Baker, the former Orioles reliever, also got to record the final out with Adley Rutschman catching him.
That was an awesome moment.
Yeah, big hug on the mound after the final out, and them two talking about playing together, and the way Adley put it was like, you never know the last time you're going to catch somebody, so you just kind of have to soak it in, and that's exactly what he was able to do with two guys where maybe he didn't realize the last time he caught Brian Baker and Andrew Rasmussen it would be the last time he caught them. So cool to see that happen, and really the highlight of the week for Rutschman, who did also, it was kind of funny on the first day when he is doing the media availabilities, and it was packed. All of the all-stars are sitting at their tables, and media is able to just kind of go from table to table. We're all packed like sardines on the outfield concourse at Citizens Bank Park. It's 95 degrees. We're all sweating. It's kind of gross. But Adley sitting out there answering questions about trade rumors, and then the next day talking to him, myself along with Andy in the clubhouse about extension talks. So kind of shows where how much in flux things are with Adley Rutschman right now. We're in back-to-back days. Those are separate headlines for the kind of comments that Adley Rutschman is having to make, and not really offering much on either side, really, but did say, he loves Baltimore. You never know what's going to happen. So certainly seems like he would be interested in a long-term extension should the Orioles bring him one. But as for right now, he is still only signed through 2027. And after that, it's anybody's guess.
Yeah, and just to give a complete picture, I'm sure most of our listeners have either seen or heard the quote that you got from Adley, but here it is. Quote, "I love the staff. I love all the guys. I love the players, the front office, to all the guys. I've had a phenomenal experience so far in Baltimore. It's been great for me. You never know what's going to happen, but I love Baltimore." End quote. I think the important phrase, at least to me, or my takeaway, is that you never know what's going to happen. That kind of just leaves it to go in all separate directions. But I will say, Matt, if anyone is primed to handle what's ahead of him, it is Adley, who is just over the past year has been very tumultuous as it pertains to these types of conversations after his not so pleasant season filled with some different injuries over the past year. For him to endure the offseason and try to get back to this all-star caliber level that we are witnessing him perform at, those conversations, they were pretty constant. And, that was definitely one player, one subject that was always floated around as, do we trade Adley Rutschman? And, he's proven that he still, maybe has the best of him, of his self in the future, as we're seeing him just continue to reach new heights on the field and get back to that Adley of old. And again, I recommend everyone go check out your stories on how you covered Adley as a subject over these past few days from all different angles over at BaltimoreSun.com. But that is probably the biggest thing for me, is you never know what's going to happen. It's very open-ended for Adley, and probably the right answer for him to take at this time.
Yeah, I mean, he's always going to be political about these kinds of things and not entrench himself into one way or the other. He's very well media trained going back to his college days. So certainly no surprise, the comments that he made, obviously being asked about it for the first time in a while. But he actually wasn't even aware that Mike Elias had come out and said that we want Adley Rutschman forever. So he was learning as we were telling him about it literally yesterday. So he really does try to block all that out and leave things to the agents as much as he can, especially as you might guess in season. Trying to have that kind of tunnel vision to focus on the game. And for Rutschman, we
focus on the game. I like that.
Yeah,
focus on he didn't hear it because he's focused on the game, and he's also focused on the game, playing Fortnite, with Shane Baz and all his other teammates. I kind of really like that he had not heard Mike Elias's comments because he's so busy focused on work. But when he gets home, he's able to relax with his teammates playing those video games. And truly, I think he gave Baltimore and the Orioles all the affection that he wanted to give them without necessarily giving them leverage.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, Elias gave up leverage in saying that he wants him forever. So right now, it does seem like there is potential for a deal here. That's kind of my read on the situation. I certainly think it is more likely that he signs an extension than he's traded at this point. The Orioles, even with Samuel Basallo signed to his 8-year, $67 million extension, still very much rely on Adley Rutschman to be their number one catcher. And they found a way to balance both of their playing times and getting Basallo's bat in the lineup, but it's required a lot of DH time for Samuel Basallo in order for Adley Rutschman to still be the number one guy. I mean, he is the better defender, certainly at this point of their respective careers. Basallo has a lot of raw tools and certainly has built a strong rapport with Trevor Rogers that's basically made him his personal catcher. But a lot of guys love throwing to Adley, and certainly has done really well to limit the running game. His pitch framing has been elite this year. He's gotten back to being a very strong blocker behind the plate as well, so helping save some wild pitches from getting away. And really, I think Rutschman is as complete a package as you can look for from a two-way catcher. Obviously, the offensive numbers have slipped a little bit. He got off to a great start to the season and has struggled to maybe maintain that over the last month or so, but still went into the All-Star break with very respectable numbers. You'd like to see the OBP get a little bit of a jump there for Rutschman, but the power has certainly been there. The best that has been on a per rate basis. I believe he's on pace for career high in slugging percentage this year. So you do love to see that from a guy that has pretty much hit third or fourth in the lineup all season. But at the same time, with the state of Basallo and still being a guy who is 21 years old and coming to his own, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to consider trading him now as opposed to potentially, maybe at next year's trade deadline if you have tried to extend him and it doesn't work. Okay, we don't want to lose him for nothing. We'll trade him now. Then I could kind of understand it. But at this point, even this offseason, I really don't think that there's much of a chance at all of the Orioles sending him somewhere else.
Yeah, the Orioles' larger problem is that their disappointing season thus far, and again, a strong finish to enter the All-Star break with their first 4-game winning streak. But their disappointing season, it's made this conversation reasonable, or relevant, maybe is a better word. And I'm sure Mike Elias is going to listen to every phone call that he gets. And, if a team offers an overwhelming package, he's got to listen and, crunch the numbers with his front office team and think about the possibilities. But again, I think I'm probably more on your side of that he is more likely to receive an extension at this point rather than be traded. And you know what? I know the focus again is on for this episode is your experience and everything that you uncovered at the All-Star week in Philadelphia. But just looking ahead, Matt, I mean, this next week and a half, next 2 weeks is really going to, say it all. Give up Mike Elias all the evidence he needs on what he needs to do ahead of that August 3 deadline. But in Adley's case, he just needs to continue doing what he's doing to get him to this point this season, which is playing at that All-Star level.
Yeah, and they are really going to look for him to take a step back forward again offensively, get back to what he was doing early in the season, especially now that Blaze Alexander is going on the injured list, because they are without probably their best offensive player over the last 6 weeks now, with him having a broken bone in his hand, a non-displaced fracture on that hit by pitch on Sunday against the Royals. Looking like maybe a 6-week type injury around that. Maybe it's 8, that kind of be the later end for that. But for the Orioles to not have that force, and he wasn't hitting at the top of the order. They kept him down at the bottom, but he did hit 6th on Sunday, was finally kind of getting a little bit higher up in the batting order there. They're going to need everybody else to kind of step up, and whether that's Adley Rutschman getting back to the April Adley Rutschman that we saw, or it's Gunnar Henderson finally turning things around, as we've kind of seen signs of happening over the last 2 weeks here. I think he's looked a lot better at the plate, been able to cut down on some of the strikeouts and hitting the ball extremely hard. You have to think that some balls are going to start bouncing his way a little bit more. Whether it's Pete Alonso taking even a bigger step forward, I think he has certainly been one of their best offensive players this year and is well on his way to a 30-homer season, sitting at 20 already on the All-Star break, or whether it's somewhere else. It's Kobe Mayo, it's Colton Cowser, it's Tyler O'Neill, whoever. They're going to need guys to step up now, especially because Blaze could play all over the place and fill a different hole every night. Guys are now probably going to get a little bit less time off now because they're not going to have the utility man to step in and give guys breaks here and there.
Yeah, on Blaze. I mean, if we're moving ahead to that discussion, what was your take or your vantage point of the unfortunately the hit by pitch that leads to his injury and the non-displaced fracture in his hand, and obviously the benches cleared. There was some chirping even after the games from both sides, and just watching it from afar didn't I obviously have tweet notifications on for you and Jacob. So even being on vacation, PTO, that the phone is still going off just so I can do my best to keep up. Want to stay unplugged, but also plugged in enough. And when you see the replay, couldn't necessarily tell that something was going on as it pertains to potential injury. Listening to the broadcast with Kevin Brown, there wasn't necessarily an injury type discussion that was surfaced. He takes off his helmet. It just seems like he's pretty emotional. Then gets subbed for Kobe Mayo. You're thinking that big lead at the time. Probably precautionary. But then afterwards, the injury news does happen. So does some chirping from both sides. What was your entire vantage point from this situation? And I'll just say my heart goes out for Blaze. He is from my very first interaction with him in spring training, I could tell like this is going to be a good guy for this clubhouse, and hopefully he does enough to produce to stay in the lineup, which is exactly what he's done over these past 4-5 months. And man, every contending team, you need a Blaze Alexander. He's versatile, he's productive, he's inexpensive, and he's completely comfortable being himself. So when Craig Albernaz said, Blaze is Blaze as it pertains as it relates to right after his injury, and he'll be back, that quote kind of summed up who Blaze Alexander is for the fans who don't get to see him up close.
Yeah, they're certainly going to miss him and the energy that he brings. And that energy was on display when he sparked a benches clearing situation between the two teams, not happy with Royals pitcher Lucas Erceg for quick pitching him. Each of the final two pitches of the at-bat, Erceg did not kind of get fully set before delivering. The first one definitely caught Alexander off guard. He was still moving his bat a little bit when Erceg started his delivery. He fouled that pitch off, and then Erceg does it again on the next pitch. He's a little bit more ready for it, but obviously it comes up and in on him and hits him in the hand, and x-rays show after the game, pretty quickly after the game, that he has that non-displaced fracture. So obviously some high emotions for him there. The situation only lasted about 90 seconds on the field, but Vinny Pasquantino had some interesting comments after the game, and then Blaze on Twitter responds to those comments. So here's what Pasquantino has to say. We had some up and in pitches the other day. To be honest, that's a guy who's hitting over 300 and is feeling good about himself, that feels the need when he gets hit that he can say something. So credit to him for feeling good about himself like that. But he's clearly not. It's a 1-2 count. We're trying to get outs. We're not trying to give away free base runners. I think that's a bad baseball mindset personally, because why would we hit a guy right there? It's just common sense. But he feels good about what he's doing right now, and credit to him. He's been having a really good year. That was my perspective on it. So that's Pasquantino. Hat tip to MLB.com. Jake Rilf tweeting that out. And then Blaze quote tweets it saying, "Weird take. Never thought it was intentional, but the two quick pitches to try and catch me off guard led to me now missing games. Thanks for the compliments, though, Bigfoot." Which, great clapback by Blaze Alexander there. Really good stuff. I do love that. But I understand Blaze's frustration, certainly with the quick pitching. Like, if you are going to quick pitch somebody, you absolutely need to have your location down. You can't try to catch somebody off guard and pull that fast one on them if you're not even going to throw it a competitive pitch and now cost Blaze games for that pitch. So certainly he's not happy about it, and you can understand why. It's an unfortunate situation for the Orioles, unfortunate for Lucas Erceg. Credit though to Jacob, partner, who caught on pretty quickly that the quick pitching was probably what he was most mad about, looking at that video, and I combed over it as well on Monday, and that definitely seems to be what Blaze was mad about in the moment, and obviously sparked the benches clearing and had his players kind of backing him up there. But it is a unfortunate situation that leaves them now without a player that, just as they have this 4-game winning streak and things are kind of trending in the right direction in a way they haven't all year, because they literally haven't had a 4-game winning streak all year. they then suffer this blow to a guy who's been a huge part of that success here over the last 2 months. So they're gonna miss Blaze for sure coming out of the break. We don't yet know what the roster move is going to be. The Orioles also optioned left-hander Nick Rickey to AAA during the break, so they actually have 2 open spots on the active roster right now, assuming Blaze gets placed on the injured list. So what that looks like, if it's going to be a Luis Vasquez or a Christian Encarnacion Strand, somebody who Vasquez can play multiple positions. Encarnacion Strand has hit for a lot of power down in AAA this year. Could it be a Heston Kjerstad if they really want to go outfield heavy? I think that's unlikely just because they have so many outfielders right now. But, with the way that Blaze kind of fills their roster so many different ways, there are multiple different paths they can take here to replace him on the roster, and what that looks like and how playing time gets divvied up moving forward still remains to be seen.
I wrote some of this in a column a few days ago following Blaze's injury and just the Orioles winning streak going into the All-Star break. Mike Elias, a hot figure in town, could very well potentially be on the hot seat. The only person that knows that is David Rubenstein and his ownership group, led by Michael Arrighetti and others. But, as it pertains to Mike Elias and player acquisition, there have certainly been instances in recent years, over his 8-season tenure, where he's whiffed on external additions, whether it be in free agency or trade acquisition. But Mike Elias also found Blaze Alexander before Jordan Westburg's injury, an injury that would have made them desperate for a player like Blaze Alexander. So I think moving forward, as it pertains to Mike Elias these next 2-3 weeks and Blaze, he basically has to show that he can find another solution, a player not necessarily to replace Blaze, but someone of that mold who he can find value in and honestly just strike gold again, especially with the season on the line. The margin of error was already thin, and now without Alexander, it shrinks a bit more. So you mentioned there being space for 2 roster moves, a pair of roster moves ahead of return to play today, when this episode comes out. But essentially just moving forward, Mike Elias, he needs to be quick on his feet over these next couple of weeks, and I know the results on the field will kind of help determine what he does, but urgency all the more higher with Blaze's injury.
Yeah, Mike Elias definitely deserves some credit for the Blaze Alexander trade, which was not super popular at the time because they had to give up Cade Stroud as well as pitching prospect Wellington Aracena, who they got at the trade deadline last year. But Stroud was one of the guys who down the stretch last year pitched really well out of the bullpen and looked like he might be somebody who could be part of the Orioles bullpen picture for a long time. And instead they go and trade for Alexander when, at that point they didn't really have a need for a third baseman or even utility man because they had, kind of so flush on position players at that time, obviously with Westburg still expected to play at that point, and Jackson Holliday not even having broken his hamate bone at that point. Blaze Alexander, with those 2 guys really having injury-plagued seasons so far, has played such an integral role for this team and really came into his own in a way that we had not yet seen from him at the major league level, and is actually the only player hitting over 300 minimum 250 plate appearances for the Orioles this year. The first Orioles player to enter the All-Star break hitting over 300 since Austin Hayes in 2023. So certainly a good company there, and for Alexander, hopefully they can get him back before the end of the year, where he can help kind of help them make a playoff push over the last few weeks of the season. But did also want to talk about here today the BBWAA annual brunch, which is held at the All-Star Game every year and is visited by Rob Manfred and the head of the Players Union, who this year is interim director Bruce Meyer. Both of them addressed the media on Tuesday morning before the All-Star Game, taking questions about the state of the game, which, as you might expect, included a lot of stuff about the potential impending lockout and CBA negotiations and what both sides have offered. And both sides really, just sitting there and listening to them both give their comments the entire time, it is clear there is a massive impasse here. And anyone who is holding their breath over not missing games next year certainly will have to take a a double check there, because it is not looking great right now. And certainly things can get better, and that is certainly the hope, that they're able to get this done before the start of next year and the season isn't impacted and they're able to play and work things out. But with the fact that MLB is searching for a salary cap and the union considers it a non-negotiable, that right there is going to be a massive pain in the side for both of these two teams in negotiations, and it's unlikely that a whole lot of traction gets done on really any other fronts until that happens. And certainly with some of the early offers that these two sides have made, where MLB is trying to shake up the draft, have players have to go through college first, or having an international draft, and talking about capping salaries and contract lengths and things like that, taking elements from the NFL, NBA, and NHL, which all, of course, have salary caps. It is a messy situation, neither side willing to really acknowledge the other. Both MLB and the Players Union saying that the fans are on their side, which is always the unfortunate part of this, is that the fans are just caught in the middle between the two sides. MLB saying they've conducted very extensive polls that say fans feel there is a competitive imbalance in their sport, and that if they are fans of a small market team, they don't think they have as good of a chance, or even a chance at all, of winning a World Series compared to the big market teams. And Players Union pointing to guys. Bruce Meyer actually named Samuel Basallo as an example of a player who, fans are saying, oh, we can never keep our stars. Well, they kept Samuel Basallo. Bobby Witt Jr. re-signed to stay in Kansas City. You had the Mariners getting Julio Rodriguez long-term, Kevin McGonigal, J.J. Weatherholt, the list goes on. And those aren't like market value deals. A lot of these guys are signing pre-arb contracts. Connor Griffin, another example of guys signing very early in their careers, some even before they've made their MLB debuts. And it's not the same thing as keeping an Aaron Judge or somebody, a Juan Soto, who hits free agency and being able to bid at the top of the market. So it is a messy situation, like I said, and one that is very convoluted and is going to take months and months to work out. They are talking right now, which is good. I mean, I remember the last lockout, there was weeks where we were hearing that they hadn't even talked and gotten back to the table. So it's like, what are you waiting for? Hopefully that's not what happens this time, that they are able to continue meeting and trying to hammer things out. But as we get closer and closer to opening day 2027, and really start to feel the heat of the calendar, and also the frustrations of not having a deal done, what this looks like by that point is going to be the number one storyline to follow as soon as the World Series wraps up.
I'm going to guess that some of the few figures that are smiling right now, Matt, are personal trainers. And I say that because, man, if I'm a MLB player or a baseball player, in the minors, threatening to reach your debut, I'm investing heavily in a trainer this offseason, because just given the expectations, and just it's you hate to see it, because All-Star Week, it was such a celebration of the game. The atmosphere there looked incredible, from on at least on the TV side. It looked pretty electric throughout over these past couple days. But man, when you look at the reality of what this is trending towards, man, there might not be baseball at least the start of next season. And you think back to the last time this occurred during the COVID shortened season, and negotiations again affected that start date. I believe July 1st of that season, so the beginning of July, was when they had that shorted, abbreviated spring / summer training, with games starting about like 2.5 weeks after that. So, I don't know if that's the greatest comparison point, because that involved, both negotiations and return to play, and also a pandemic. But that's the most recent example that we have to look at. So, man, we're looking at July 15th. So first pitch, opening day wouldn't have not even occurred yet under that timeline. So hoping they can figure it out soon. But man, if I'm a player, I'm investing heavily in my individual training this year, given that it seems unlikely that what's that the meme of that New York Jet player that tries to enter the facility with his card.
Oh yeah, and the card's not working. I forget who that is. But yeah,
I feel like I feel like we're going to see, that might be a moment that comes to reality for all of baseball. You hope that they can figure it out. And, I have my own arguments that, I'm weighing for a potential column on, what makes sense for both sides. But Again, you hope that they can come to an agreement, and like what you said, that can happen quickly. It could also, really also it looks like it's going to happen slowly. So we'll see where that trends, and let's enjoy baseball while it's here, and hope that the stoppage isn't that long. But let's transition to a little bit more positive news. I would say, Matt, does Baltimore have any chance of hosting a All-Star game in the future? Given especially we talked heavily about the multi-million-dollar renovation occurring at Camden Yards, Oriole Park, even ongoing. They're still renovating part of the concourses, adding different bars and such in the outfield area. But I think the biggest ones were the sound system, the Truist Club, and then obviously the massive scoreboard, the video board. Camden Yards is definitely gotten up there in terms of baseball experience and kind of, I look at Wrigley, and you and I have discussed this before, but having a ballpark and just a one with so much history. And you think of the best ballparks in baseball as it pertains to history. You think of Fenway, you think of Wrigley, you think of Camden Yards, Oriole Park at Camden Yards. But the way that again, this is a credit to the owner David Rubenstein and his group. What they were able to do, they were able to upgrade it in a way that brought it to today's generation. And so, basically, my question to you is, what did you learn as it pertains to Camden Yards? Hopefully, hosting an All-Star game in the future.
Yeah, the Orioles have one of the longest droughts in Major League Baseball of not hosting an All-Star game. But Rob Manfred did actually say that their turn might be delayed here because LA 2028, MLB is trying to, for the first time, work out a deal to participate in the Olympics, and Rob Manfred suggesting that it would be mandatory for star players to play if they were to work out a deal. Obviously, this is something that the Players Union is pushing back on, and there are certain things that it needs to be ironed out kind of on that home front before that really gets finalized. But if MLB does decide to participate in the Los Angeles 2028 Olympics, it appeared that the San Francisco Giants will be leapfrogging that line and jumping up and hosting that so that they can have an extended All-Star break where they would have the Home Run Derby and the All-Star game, and then they would have the players participating in the Olympics, which there would only be 6 teams in the Olympics coming up. It's kind of an abridged version of a WBC. But for the whatever players play, they would have it kind of as an extended All-Star break happening in the middle of the season, which is exciting because talk about like pitchers being built up for the WBC in spring and only being able to throw a couple of innings versus being built up to make full starts in the middle of the year. I mean, we could be seeing a Tarek Skubal or whoever else, making a Olympic start and going the distance or whatever it might be. So certainly that is an exciting prospect, but it does mean that the Orioles, who right now are third in line to host an All-Star game behind the Cubs, who have already been awarded the 2027 All-Star game to be held at Wrigley Field next year, and the Blue Jays, who obviously would like to get that game maybe in 2029. So it looks like 2030 is the year to circle for Orioles fans of the All-Star game returning to Camden Yards. The Boston Red Sox are also in the mix. They are a little bit, their drought not as long as the Orioles, so maybe they end up with 2031, which Rob Manfred did say that he is more chronologically inclined than his predecessor, referring to Bud Selig, in awarding these things. So certainly seems like he is trying to get teams on the schedule to host All-Star games who have not done it before. Philly was an example of a team, they had never even held it in Citizens Bank Park, but also they wanted to line that up with America 250 and everything. So that was kind of decided well out. Maybe they are able to kind of set this in stone once they figure out their not just the Olympic stuff, but also making sure that a season is played in 2027, because if a lockout, pushes next season back, or they don't have a season, or maybe there's no All-Star game because it starts late, whatever it might be, they might push Chicago back to 2029, for example, and then the rest of the teams have a domino effect. So I think really the two things to watch for the Orioles now at this point, because it was clear that they needed to do renovations to kind of get back in the good graces and warrant having an All-Star game at Camden Yards, and they have done that. So they're officially kind of on that list, as Manfred talked about last year at the All-Star game. But now I think the two things to know are when is MLB going to be participating in the 2028 Olympics, and what does the lockout do to the 2027 season? Once those two things have been decided and we know kind of some clarity on the future and how long the next CBA is, then they can start to map those things out. And I think that the Orioles will be part of that first batch of teams that is able to be awarded a game here, with 2030 looking like the soonest it could probably happen.
It's a pretty long drought. When was the last time Camden Yards hosted the All-Star game? I believe early 1990s.
93.
Wow.
I wrote it here. I should probably have it is the Orioles haven't hosted since 1993. The Blue Jays last hosted in 91, and the Cubs last hosted in 1990. Now there's then a gap between the Orioles at number 3, and then at number 4 is Boston 1999, followed by Milwaukee 2002, Houston 2004, and Detroit 2005. So once the Orioles, Blue Jays, Cubs, Red Sox group kind of gets scheduled out, I feel like then they might move on to that next crop of teams in the Brewers, the Astros, and the Tigers there to maybe follow. But that's also going to be after Rob Manfred has retired, so who knows what the next commissioner decides to do at that point, which is also why Orioles fans should probably be hoping that this gets finalized before Rob Manfred's contract is up, which I believe is going to be in 3 years, 2 or 3 years. If this can get locked in before that, they don't have to worry about a new commissioner coming in and wanting to maybe change up the methodology there.
So 1993, you were -3 years old?
-4. Yeah.
-4. Okay. I was -1 month with my birthday being in August, if that All-Star game occurred in July. But man, I think, if Baltimore fans, I think you should focus that the Orioles' turn, it appears to be coming, that Camden Yards is going to host this grand spectacle in the coming years. It's just frustrating that you can't say exactly when, but they do appear to be on the short list of teams in terms of the queue for lining that up. Matt, any other big takeaways from All-Star weekend and, before the second half gets underway here soon?
No, I think we've hit on all the major stuff. I'm just kind of scrolling back through some of my tweets here to make sure we've kind of hit on everything. But I think Adley Rutschman's red carpet outfit was not as crazy this time around. Had the Pirates of the Caribbean look back in 2024 that earned a lot of jeers from his teammates. Went for something more subtle, all black, textured shirt, pants, black shoes kind of situation. So
Armani and Prada, not mad at it.
Yes. No, he did say Gregory Armani.
Giorgio Armani
on the red carpet. So did have to be corrected there. He knew he wasn't saying it right, but couldn't remember, which he is not the type to really be interested in designers and things like that. He had a stylist who picked it out and left it to them. So
do you like the shoes, the loafers?
I actually looked them up, and they were like $1,300. I was like, they don't look like they should cost $1,300 to me. I don't think you'll catch me buying a pair of shoes like that. But
that's the cost of designer.
It's true.
I will say the cologne, one of the main colognes, actually was a gift from Bia a few months ago that is in my rotation right now, is Prada's Paradigm. It is a great scent. So, I know the Prada line a little well, and I'm glad you did your research, but that's the cost of all that stuff. $1,300. I actually would have imagined it might have been more.
Yeah, honestly, would not have been surprised, to be honest. But one other thing I did want to mention from this, I did write a story about the pick that the Orioles made to draft Adley Rutschman back in 2019. Obviously, Bobby Witt Jr. went in the pick immediately following, and Witt has developed into one of the best players in baseball. He is probably the AL frontrunner right now to win MVP, and is an all-around great shortstop and someone who was willing to take a smaller deal to stay in Kansas City long term. All things that would have been great for the Orioles, but ultimately, I do feel that the pick for Adley Rutschman, which at the time was considered a no-brainer, he was the most hyped prospect since Bryce Harper and a slam dunk #1 overall pick. I do think that him getting back to the All-Star game this year kind of cements that he's lived up to the hype of what he was expected to be, and a couple of seasons with down ballot MVP votes, one of the best catchers in baseball right now. And I went around and talked to several of the guys who were in that draft class, including Bobby Witt, as well as Shea Langolier, C.J. Abrams, and I didn't talk to Riley Green, but he was there, and Corbin Carroll, another. All guys who were in that same draft class and knew what kind of player Rutschman was, looking up at him at the top of the draft, just to ask them for their thoughts on him, how much they followed him throughout their careers, and now it being full circle of all of them ending up at this All-Star game together. So definitely go check that out among the many stories from this week. But just an interesting, I felt, storyline and kind of side story to this whole thing was both of them being there overlapping at this All-Star game, him and Bobby Witt.
Matt, known Orioles beat reporter and Adley Rutschman beat reporter these past few days. Man, you crushed it. We'll cheers to you when we get together soon.
Appreciate it, brother. All right, y'all, we are going to go ahead and wrap up there. I know it has been Orioles heavy on the show for the last few weeks here. It's been a pretty dead period for the Ravens. We've had a couple of Ravens segments, but not too much. Rest assured, that is coming. Training camp just under 2 weeks away now for the Ravens, getting their 2026 season started. So very excited to start diving into all of that here with both Josh and Sam. So be on the lookout. We will certainly be having more Ravens conversations moving forward. But don't forget to like and subscribe. Give the show 5 stars on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you guys get your podcasts, and give us a follow. Engage with us on social media at Sun Early Birds on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Josh, any final words for the good people?
Yeah, Matt, this is a nod to, one of my favorite shows growing up. I remember watching this in middle school, but pardon the interruption, with Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon, they always have a segment at the end where they run over their self-corrected mistakes and their producers, letting them know what was incorrectly stated throughout the show. This is a Matt basically runs this entire thing, so we not necessarily behind the scenes producers helping us, flagging us for mistakes. But I actually realized I had one earlier. I said return to plays today, which when this episode comes out on Thursday. I'm just so excited for baseball to be back. Excited to be back on the saddle. The Orioles, they actually do not play the Houston Astros. They don't begin that series until Friday, so that was my mistake. But very soon enough, the Orioles will be back in action, and we're going to know pretty soon here enough kind of the direction that Mike Elias is going to take as that deadline rapidly approaches, the August 3 trade deadline. But yeah, just wanted to throw that in there. Return to play is on Friday, not Thursday.
Yes, it is. And an important series for the Orioles, facing a team in the Astros that's one of the teams directly ahead of them in the AL wildcard race. Jacob will be out there for the Sun, and I'll be out in Boston for the following series, another team that is right there in that AL wildcard race and one that has been surging over recent weeks. So looking forward to seeing how the Orioles do on this upcoming road trip. He's Josh Tolentino. I'm Matt Weyrich. I want to thank y'all so much for listening, and have a good one.